Welcome, everybody. We're going to wait 1 minute to allow other members to join. Please bear with us. I do have 5:01. I will call to order this meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission on October 23rd. I'll read the script, so bear with me. This open meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission is convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. We are using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate as an attendee. Members of the public who have a comment will use the raise hand feature. And please give us a moment to promote you to the panelist position so that your video will be on as well as your audio. And we are following the 3-minute recommendation that the select board is using for public comments. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. We'll go through the roll call. Seth Engelborg.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella has said that she will be joining us late. I do not see Don Holgate at this time. Wendy Hudson.
Here.
I do not see Dave Iverson at this time. Art Johnson has notified us he may not be able to attend. Talk to us, Nat.
Oh, aye. Here, sorry.
Barry Rector.
Here.
Joe Topham.
Here.
John Trudell.
Here.
And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Leslie Snell.
Here.
Mike Burns.
Here.
Megan Trudell.
Here.
Nikki Sharif. Nikki, you can just go ahead and say hello and tell me if I pronounced your name wrong. We're not hearing you, Nikki. I'm not sure what the issue is. We'll figure it out. We have Raisa Kwame joining us from Mass DOT.
Here.
And we also have Gary Roberts from the NRTA joining us for a presentation later.
Here.
Thank you. I don't think I missed anybody there. So the chair will introduce each item on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the members will, sorry, something is messed up on my list here. Members will be invited to provide any comment, questions, or motions. And following that, members of the public may be requested to offer comments on certain agenda items where we're having public discussion. Okay, and then each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Thank you all. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I don't think we have any adjustments. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you, John, for the motion and Nat for seconding. And roll call vote. Any further discussion? No roll call vote. Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Wendy Hudson.
Aye.
Nat Lowell.
Aye.
Barry Rector.
Aye.
Joe Topham.
Aye.
John Trudell.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you. At this time, are there any members of the public that wish to offer a comment for items not otherwise on the agenda? We do have some members of the public in attendance. Please use the raise hand feature if you have a comment at this time. And Megan, Nikki, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we will go on to the minutes. Minutes of August 21st. Wendy and I provided minor edits to those. Are we able to put those on the screen? Did anyone else have comments on the minutes from August 21st? Do we need to put them on the screen or, oh, there we go. Thank you, Nikki. We're seeing the website. Here we go. Okay, so if we want to point out the edits that were suggested, Wendy, you want to go ahead and mention the two that you had?
Yeah, I just on page 4, it mentioned in regards to the Rotary discussion, Carl Jelemy had started that, where is it? It's right in it, that the it had been approved at town meeting, and then it said, but it was not approved at town meeting, but it was really approved at town meeting, but not approved at the ballot is what I believe it should read.
Great.
And then the other one was just Michael Burns's name spelled wrong. So it's pretty important, but
and then I had one at the near the end in the discussion of the meeting calendar.
oh, I saw that little one too.
So just adjusting that first sentence where it says the third and fourth Monday of each month, not the fourth Monday of each month, will work for the holiday schedule. That just isn't a clear sentence. So the statement was that neither the third nor fourth Monday of the month will work consistently because of holidays. We just have an edit to clarify that sentence. Anything else from members? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. Seth Engelborg to approve the minutes.
Abstain since I wasn't there.
Thank you, Seth. Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson's not here. Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector.
Aye.
I'm
Judge
here,
Hop-
Madam Chair.
Dave, you're here. Thank you.
Yes, and I vote yes.
Thank you. All right. I think I'm on Joe Topham
Aye.
and John Trudell
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you for that. Next, we have the update from the NRTA from the Administrator Gary Roberts. Gary, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Mike Burns is going to help me here with the slides, hopefully. We're just starting out with the an overview of the how the 2023 summer season went. I'm not going to lie that it was a little bit of a challenge when I arrived back in late January or early February. We had a total of 4 buses that ran out of the entire fleet. I think this first season, my goal was to get through the season and to make needed changes behind the scenes that the public really wasn't going to see, but things that needed to be done, and getting the equipment to be ready for service. And we did accomplish completing all routes this year. There was no routes that were skipped. The previous year, there was one route that didn't run. I believe it was Pulpus, was canceled due to equipment. So we did get through the season. If Mike wants to move on to the next slide. So our ridership numbers, these numbers here are a little different than how I track. We track on a fiscal year. These are calendar years. Technically, we did see an increase in ridership. It's just, but by the months by which we count, we go July 1 to June. We had a 241,000 was the total ridership in the fiscal year. Right now, where it shows on 23, we're missing obviously the October, November, and December numbers because the this calendar year that it's showing isn't completed yet. The numbers were down a little bit on the season, the summer season. It wasn't a significant drop, but we did see some increases in the winter season. Ridership was slightly up, which we hope to improve on with newer equipment that's running on the routes. Currently, all 3 routes are being run with their brand new, smaller shuttle buses that are gas powered, and they're quiet and comfortable and no rattles. And I'm sure the neighbors are appreciating it. I think the drivers are happy to be in some new vehicles, and the riders should notice a better ride as well. Is there any questions on these numbers that we have?
Gary, you said gas powered, you meant gasoline, not propane gas, right?
Correct. The gasoline powered, I'll go further into the fleet a little further into it. This page here actually shows the breakdown from 2016 through COVID, the COVID year and a half, where the numbers are starting to rebound. They're still well off. The numbers obviously peaked in 2016, and there's been quite a drop off since 2020, with the lowest numbers seen. But I think that looking at the if you see in January, February, and March, between 22 and 23, you'll see an increase on the ridership, which was straight through into April. June and July, the numbers were down a little bit. August as well. I think, in my opinion, from my time that I was here and from my years coming over here, that the number one is traffic is getting to be unbearable for the buses, and I think some people would rather take an Uber than get stuck in traffic and sitting in a bus where the bus is sitting in the same traffic as everyone else. The only difference is you can't get out of the bus. You have to wait to the next bus stop to get off. Some of my other thoughts on our numbers is reliability. I know prior to my arrival, there was some reliability issues with the vehicles and whether or not they were actually showing up to their scheduled stops or if they would make it through the entire trip. And we've worked very hard to ensure that the vehicles are ready for service each day, to cut back on mechanical issues. The problem is when, sometimes if people are on a bus and they have a bad experience, they may decide not to go back on the bus. So it's on us to improve the service and the vehicles that we have in operation and providing newer vehicles that will get people to take the bus. Are there any questions on these numbers? If not,
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
Just wondered if we have data on, the number of e-bikes and just bicycle riding. It seems like rather than sit in an Uber, my alternative would be hop on a bike and get there in half the time. So, and we see all these millions of e-bikes zipping around us, at high risk, as we've discussed in this committee. So, that seems to me like the more of a replacement mode. Just a thought.
yeah, I do not. Mike may have some better information on that. I don't. I wouldn't have any. I know that they're prevalent everywhere. Zipping by people on the bike path going 35. So they seem to get through traffic a lot easier.
Thank you, Wendy, for that question. We also have one from Dave.
I just wanted to piggyback on Wendy. I think she's 100% right. I think that you could almost track the use of scooters and e-bikes with the falling ridership on the NERDA. And I'm not, that's just the way it is. It's nobody's fault, but I think that it's, if we did have numbers, I think it would track pretty right, spot on. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at a couple of numbers here, not counting 2016, 17, 18, and 19, where the ridership was Obviously, it was new, it was record breaking. We didn't have the seasonal, the winter ridership for that. Everything seemed to be consolidated into the summer months. Then we hit COVID, and you'll see a considerable drop down to the 20,000s in the prime time, July and August. And then when things start to become a little bit normal, for what it is, 2021 and 22, you'll see it go back up to the 55 and 60,000 into that range. Last year, I just want to look at, even though it maybe dropped a little bit, especially in August, down to 56,000, we also have to consider that rentals. I can tell you just from the real estate market, rentals were down last year. You would never know it because of the traffic that we have, but I think the single passenger drivers contributed to the traffic. But as far as ridership there, looks like rentals. So for public transportation, if you weren't bringing a car or renting a car, you use that public transportation. So it's kind of relevant. If rentals were down across the board, maybe being that the hub is downtown, that would contribute to the drop in the ridership for 2023. We'll see how that correlates with next year.
Thank you, John. Gary, go ahead.
I will say that, statewide with the RTAs, there's been a struggle to return to pre-COVID numbers. I think that NRTA is well above several of the other transit authorities that have really struggled to get their foothold back in with the ridership. Our numbers are down a little bit, but we're well above we can go to the bullet points with the budget and capital items. So on the budget and capital performance, we're just showing that the fare box recovery rate here is actually, it's not bad at 21% of our fare recoveries. We brought in, where's my notes? It was 618,000 in revenue, or 615,000, I apologize. In revenues for between pass sales, regular fares, and outside businesses that buy seasonal passes for employees or hotels that have vouchers. On the local and federal, the state sources, one thing here is that the local share is quite high compared to other RTAs. We received 1.17 million in local share. The state provided only 33% of our operating funds at 589,000. The remaining funds that we used to bridge the gap for operations was CARES Act funding between CRISA and ARPA funding. That was necessary to fund the operation, as we didn't draw any 5311 federal operating funds this year. The goal is to use off the CARES Act funding. On the capital side, we did a very large increase on RTA cap expenditures. From the previous year on FY22, there was 177,000 expended on capital items. This year, the number jumped up to 1.5 million, and that was mainly due to the state of the fleet when I arrived. There was a lot of funds expended on repairs to the vehicles, the purchase of the 4 new shuttle buses that we have for the winter service, upgrades to our tracking system, our paratransit system software is being upgraded. There was a lot of items that were found to be out of date, and with those expenditures, we're hoping that's our first step in improving the services for the rider experience for the passengers, to know exactly where the bus is, when it'll arrive, make booking paratransit trips a lot easier. They'll actually get phone calls to tell them that the van will be there in about 10 minutes. They can cancel online if they don't want to call in. They can book their trips online. It's going to be a lot quicker and more efficient to get the vehicles where they need to be with all this new software that's being added. On the customer experience, the on-time performance showed at 96% on time. It's very difficult to stay on time during the summer months. I think one of the saving graces are that the on-time performance is based on when the bus leaves from the Greenhound and it ends up at the end of the line. We don't technically have exact times when the buses are going to be at each stop because it's all based on traffic and how quickly you can get through it leaving town and getting back into town. But the on-time performance was pretty good, and the Island Ride on-time performance, I believe, was at 99.4%. So that was even better. On the health and sustainable transportation, the trend was that the operating expenses dropped per vehicle revenue hour down to $94. I think a lot of that is attributed to the amount of money that was spent to get the vehicles in the condition that they should be in to operate each day. I think before there was a lot of buses broke on the road and there was money being spent just to fix a Band-Aid to keep it going, and it caused more issues with the vehicles. We put in a new preventative maintenance program, and if preventative maintenance is done correctly, you're definitely going to see your vehicle revenue hour cost drop, and I think we're starting to see that now. As I said before, all routes were in operation, which with Pulpus that didn't run at all. Now that the purpose is going to be getting the ridership back to Pulpus. If people were here for a summer and the bus didn't run the entire summer, they may assume that it's not running this summer again. So now that the buses are out there, buses will run all routes that are scheduled. Before I move on to the condition of the fleet, because that could take a little bit, are there any questions on any of the information that we had on this screen?
John?
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Gary, it's just in the past, before we had year-round service, statistically, I believe the Mid-Island Loop represented about 50% of the overall revenue that was generated through the NRTA. Is that still generally the case now that we've added year-round service to certain loops?
Well, I think the Old South route has strong ridership, but I mean the majority during the off season, the year-round service that was added, it is the Mid-Island and the Maya Comet that that's where the people that live on the island year-round, that's Mid-Island is where they're at, and that's where the ridership is that during those points. I was a little surprised to see that some of the beach runs were off this summer. Surfside, the numbers were a little lower than I would have expected. Jetties was lower. I think that last year and this year as well, because of the equipment, there was a very small van that was running on it. And I don't think that people may have realized that it was actually the NRTA bus. It was an Island Ride van that they were operating to run it. So there's, a new fleet is going to go a long way in attracting ridership, but there are definite areas. Mid-Island seems to be the strongest performing routes. Nantucket is a strong route during the summer season. There's nothing during the off season. We're going to have to look to see what the demand is, if any, to try to provide some services to other parts of the island if there is any.
Gary, do you track the weather? The number of rainy days might impact the beach traffic.
I do look at it when we print our GFI reports that show our ridership. If I see some really drop off numbers and I'm like really concerned, why did that happen? I'll go onto the cameras actually that are in the vehicles, and and as soon as you boot them up and you see that it's a rain day, then yes, that explains it. There are other days that for some reason or another, I don't know why the ridership was as low as it was. Some of it I pushed on the operator as there was some training issues on the use of the fare boxes, whether they're logged into it properly, whether or not everyone is actually paying to ride on the bus. Not that they don't pay, but they may have a pass. The driver knows that they have a pass, so they don't have them swipe the pass, and then you're not recording the ride. So there's a lot to it, to tracking ridership, and there's variables that can explain each one of them, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move over to the system condition, Mike. I'll just touch on real quick on obviously the fleet of equipment here is it's past its life. We have 2010 buses. They're a 7-year bus. They should have been replaced. The replacement plan should have been in place to start replacing in 2017, and then in 18 there should have been more replaced. That hasn't happened. So out of the fleet of 19 buses, we're at the point that 19 buses need to be replaced, that they've reached the end of their life. We had to do something quickly when I arrived because of the condition. I was able to get funding to purchase 4 of the vehicles that are on the screen right now. They're a Ford Transit van that has the bike rack. It has the destination sign, the stop request, has a wheelchair lift, capacity for 2 passengers that utilize wheelchairs. It's a much smaller capacity. It was planned to be used for the winter. It's a 12-seat capacity to the vehicle. The vehicles that are currently on the Mid-Island and the My Comet are 19 passenger. But these vehicles will fit the bill to get us through the winter. They don't require a CDL license to drive them. That opens up the pool to drivers, which the operator has already seen how that has helped to easily get drivers. It's very hard to get a commercial driver's license, and it's even harder on the island because you have to leave the island to take the test and basically to do the training as well. Getting tests sometimes leads up to 3 months currently with the RMV to get the CDL done through the state police. So this is going to operate to get us through the winter. It gives more time for work to be done on the older equipment to try to get them through another season. There was no plans in the STIP when I arrived out for the next, is it 28, Mike, I believe, 24 to 28. There's no funding planned for the purchase of any equipment. So we're gonna have to look at trying to get an amendment done possibly for this year to see if we can get some funding. And in November, we're gonna start taking a close look at the long-range planning for funding to start replacing the equipment. There is a grant for propane-powered vehicles that it's falling apart. There was no manufacturer that bid on it. It's $4.5 million grant that they will not allow it to switch to all electric vehicles. It has to be a low emission vehicle, which is propane, CNG, fuel cell, or diesel electric hybrid. The lack of CNG or fuel cell, that kind of eliminates those options. I was working on getting the grant switched to hybrid, to look at hybrid vehicles that could have the ability to switch to electric power as they entered into town, or if they entered into Wisconsin or the airport. And the manufacturer, all manufacturers, but specifically the one that does a 30-foot bus, has decided to stop manufacturing hybrid buses because they're putting all their resources into battery electric buses, 100% electric powered. So that funding right now is kind of left floating about to see what else can possibly do. We've tried every avenue, and it's there's been a wall in front of us at each point. If Mike goes to the next screen, this is a battery electric bus that I tested during Daffodil Weekend. It's a small 12-passenger, has room for 7 standees in the bus. It's a low floor vehicle. It's 100% electric powered. It's very narrow. It would handle the roads for the mid-island routes. There would be no noise for the neighbors. We currently are working with MassDOT for a funding transfer for a line item that we had to purchase 2 of these vehicles. We could get them very quickly as the manufacturer is shipping buses at this time. I did sign on to a contract to purchase them with Martha's Vineyard, and Gatra is also on the contract. Martha's Vineyard has received 3 of them, and they have them in service. They're using them on demand service and on some of the smaller routes, and they've been performing great. The only issue when you go to electric is the infrastructure and the charging needs. And these vehicles have 130-mile range on a full charge. The thought is to put a level 3 charger in town. I'm working on a grant with Remain to fund that. That would give the bus the ability to recharge in an hour to 100%, possibly in a 15-minute break time period. It could pick up 25% charge to be able to continue for the entire day. The only issues that we'll have to deal with is capacity, and just take a look on how, if we have to increase frequency or how it will work. It would be a great bus for the Jetties Beach. That wouldn't even need to be recharged. It would be able to do the entire day without even recharging. So this is the plan for the next purchase. We're pretty excited about it. It got great feedback during the test here. They're getting good feedback on the vineyard with it. It's been tested in cold weather climates in Minnesota. It's been tested up in Canada, and it's performing well for the RTAs that have purchased them. Do we have any questions on that?
John?
Hi, sorry to monopolize your time, Gary. But I know you're coming on within the last year, and we've brought this up in years past, and so I'm just trying to get an update on things. Looking at purchase of vehicles, do you have an idea, a sense of what the cost is for each of the buses, whether it be a hybrid or if it's electric?
Well, this particular vehicle that you're looking at comes in at around $300,000. The grant that was out for the propane vehicles was in the range of, I think it was $265 to $290 was the projected cost for each vehicle. The hybrid ones that I was looking at was a heavy duty bus. They were a much bigger bus. They would only be for outlying routes that go out to Sconset via, whether it be Milestone or Old South, the airport, just because of the size of the vehicle. Those were in the range of they would be closer to $750,000 to $800,000. They're a 12-year bus, 500,000 mile heavy duty bus. This bus here is a 10-year bus. But the price on this compared to a full-size electric bus, whether like a 35-foot or a 32-foot, they're coming in around $1 million a piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I would prefer to start with something that would fit into our budget.
And have you explored leases? So if we're looking at a 10-year on this purchase, obviously, I don't know what the residual value would be after the term of the 10 years. But if we're looking at a purchase of 19 vehicles or replacing 19, I always look at things like, maintenance costs, yearly maintenance costs, mechanics, obviously labor, everything to do with labor, including, benefits and, things like that factored in. But if there was a 2-year or 3-year or 4-year lease on that, obviously, with the income that we get just generated from the loops, putting that towards knowing that every maybe 2 or 3 years you trade those in and you get new ones, similar to a regular a private lease. I know police stations and things like that, they'll have certain police bureaus towns will have lease programs. So it just, everything's updated all the time. I don't know what the cost would be. I'm not saying that that's the answer. I was just wondering if there's any comparison with that as opposed to purchasing these vehicles.
Well, generally in the bus world, I mean, I've heard of companies that they'll lease the battery. They'll pay it out over time on the battery cost. With federal dollars, I mean, you're purchasing the vehicle. There's not many companies that I know of that even do. Proterra was doing some leases, trying to get their buses out on the road. I think Ripta leased a bus for a year. They ended up purchasing them at that time. Proterra now is filed for bankruptcy. It's an ever-changing market. I think that's why going with something with a vehicle has a less a 10-year lifespan, or if it's a 7-year lifespan, that's the benefit. Then if you go to a 12-year bus, nobody really keeps them 12 years. It's 15 years in the bus industry. You're getting 600,000 miles out of it. You won't do that here just because of the mileage that they run. But yes, with the electric buses, the maintenance costs drop dramatically. There's no fluids. There's, your brakes last forever on them. There is a drop off there with savings, but it's an investment that all the RTAs are struggling with now, is the startup. So that's why I'm looking at starting up with 2 small ones, and you work your way from there.
Yeah, and again, I'm not beating a dead horse, but when you look at the average price for an electric vehicle is about 300,000, and we're pushing 19, close to 20. So you're looking at about $6 million for the purchase, and amortized over 10 years, depreciating, and your cost would be roughly about 600,000 per year. So if the ridership is generating about $615,000 in revenue, not counting federal funding and grants and things like that, you're still faced with, on the 9th and 10th year, a 9 and 10-year-old bus. If that money could be offset with a lease and always updating the fleet with 2 and 3 years, even if it was a 3-year lease or even a 5-year lease, at least at 5 years you'd be getting a brand new fleet and incorporating that. So again, I don't know all the figures. I'm not in the bus business. I used to be in the transportation business with owning a trucking business, and I know there were different programs, but I just didn't know if anything was explored with that, because it seems like even with a wash, it still factors in the downtime, the maintenance, the labor for maintenance, and also the age. At some point, it's great to have a new vehicle in the beginning, but at the end of its term, you're looking at a 9 and 10-year-old, which starts once we buy it. It's going to start to get into labor and maintenance again, so we have to factor that at the end of the purchase.
Yeah, well, the problem with the bus world, with bus industry, is buses are not built to be like on a showroom. Typically, if you were to order an electric powered bus, not the one that I'm showing here, but from Gillig or New Flyer, the main manufacturers, you're looking at 24 months from the time that you put in your purchase order to even see the vehicle, because their backlog of they have so many orders that are piling up that it's you plan your funding well in advance, or to know when your purchases are going to be done. And in no way do I envision that we're going to replace the entire fleet at one time. It's not gonna happen. The funding's not gonna happen to do that, and it probably wouldn't be that wise to do it, because if you do them all at one time, your 10 years are gonna come and you're gonna have to replace them all at once. It should be done 2 per year. You know, you constantly rotating the fleet through. And it keeps your needs down, and you just have the plan, which, you know, the plan has been developed, but the problem is when you're so far behind now, it's gonna be hard to get caught up to get the plan where it should be.
No, I appreciate the info. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Go ahead.
So we touched on the diesel hybrid. There was a Volkswagen grant. The Volkswagen mitigation grant was to pull diesel engine vehicles off the road and replace them through the grant with low emission vehicles. There was a grant, a smaller size grant that just came out that was more for municipal refuse trucks or that type of vehicle, shifters in yards. They did have transit as an acceptable vehicle on the amount. It was an $11 million award with a $500,000 max. So those 22 awards that were going to be given, we were not selected on that. There's another one coming out in a month that, you know, we're going to apply for that too, to see if we can get it. I've had experience in the past at my old company that we did replace 6 vehicles with the VW grant, where they cover the entire cost of the vehicle. There's no match or anything. And it was, that's how we got started with electric at my previous job. So we're going to keep searching for grants and options for funding. This carbon reduction funding that we've talked about, seeing if that's something that could be a good fit for us here. The state believes that it might be, so we're exploring that as well. Okay, so the fare free implementation, which Mike we had discussed this. Mike knows a little more of the background on what's been looked at before. I'll just touch on fare free has been, every RTA did fare free during COVID. One thing that was seen in my role as a director of maintenance before, and I was in charge of a fare collection system at a larger company, that I will say that maintenance downtime for vehicles due to fare boxes was eliminated, which there is a lot of maintenance to electronic fare boxes. There's a lot of expense to electronic fare boxes. The cost of a fare box alone is $18,000 a piece. So it takes a while of collecting revenue before you even pay for the fare box itself. Ridership has shown increases in Worcester and Merrimack Valley due to going fare free. It eases the operation of a system when, especially when it's a tourist destination like Nantucket, where most of them will approach the bus for the first time and say, how do I pay for the bus? Do you take a credit card? You don't take a credit card. Oh, I need ones. They're fumbling for money and change. And while that's going on, it slows up the whole process of loading the bus with people. Explain the driver explanation to them, or people saying that they paid and it didn't read the money. There's sometimes conflict between the riders and the operators, or if the person doesn't have money but they want to ride the bus, it decreases all that. There is a savings on our end for, you know, revenue collection cost of counting the money, the deposits of the money, the fare tickets that we buy. They give change cards, there's a cost to them. So sometimes, you know, a 50-cent change card to the person may cost 5 cents a card that we're producing to give out the change. The seasonal passes have a cost to purchase. The year-round passes are dated from January to December. They're imprinted into the card. So if we have 5,000 cards that are left over, if we have 3,000 cards that are left over, they can't be used the following year. They're disposed of and new cards have to be purchased. So there are upsides and there are downsides to Fare Free. If Mike goes to the next slide.
Wendy, did you have a question on that side?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't think I had seen it before in this extra part. I mean, I am sold. That sounds like a lot more downside than upside. I'll just say that. And I've always loved Fare Free. I just think it aligns with all of our mission. But my specific question is advertising revenue, like on the buses. And I'm sorry if you'll get to this in a minute, but do you think that there's an opportunity to work with the business community, for example, and really ramp up to replace some of that revenue?
I will say that from my previous job, we had for a time we had very strong advertising on the vehicles with tail signs, the side signs, interior signs in the vehicles. There's new, I think it's progressed more now to internal signage. There's digital signage in the buses now where you use GPS coordinates that you sell your storefront or whatever, and you have an ad in the vehicle. As the bus is approaching, it triggers the advertisement to come on digital signs to explain next stop. You can go and get a burger at this place, or different things that are there. I know that I've seen that there is no advertising currently on the buses. It's on a list of things to look into, but there was more pressing items. I didn't know if there was, even seeing that there was no advertising on the exterior of the buses, if that was something that they were not allowing to be done. It's something more that I would have to investigate. It was probably lower down on the list than other items that needed to be addressed right away.
As a follow-up, with your permission, Madam Chair, I was not considering the outside. I don't think that would go over well with the HDC or the community. It was definitely the interior digital things that we're all used to seeing, subways or whatever else. And I would imagine there must be a third party that would just take that over and be psyched to have your real estate inside on a bus, that would deal with it for a fee. I think there's a lot to that potential. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the Fare Free, I mean, I'm not saying implementation. I know there was an article in the paper today saying that the NRTA administrator is pressing his case for Fare Free. That's really not the case. I think that it was more of the discussion, so everyone understood the sides of it. We have fare revenues of $550,000 to $600,000 that I had mentioned earlier, that there has to be somehow that funding has to be made up. Granted, the cost, this year in capital equipment, we're upgrading some of the software that was very, very old that operated the fare boxes. Those are capital investments that we're getting funding through grants or RTA cap to do these things. But when it comes to fare revenue, there has to be something to supplement the loss of income because of the way our funding works. We are dependent on the fare revenue. We're never going to break even on fare revenue, but we are dependent on the cost to operate the bus system. So I know, Mike, we had some discussions that there was well before my arrival, looking at the date of 2018, there was talk of paid parking in town. The advertising's been mentioned, but there would have to be, one of the drawbacks of Fare Free is there has to be the supplemental income to cover that cost. So Worcester.
You have a question you want to interject, or? I'm sorry, Seth. Sorry, I'm seeing people raise and lower hands, so my apologies, Gary, for interrupting.
That's okay.
Can I go, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Gary. And just first of all, I wholeheartedly support Fare Free. I think I mentioned that before, using it when it promoted last winter here on Nantucket, and also using it extensively when I went to school at UMass Amherst. I rode the Fare Free buses there every single day, multiple times a day. Didn't have a vehicle. It was great. I will say, and I know you're getting into how we're going to cover the cost for it. And I know especially we're talking about it, and there were some articles in the media today about taking revenue from a supposed paid parking program in town. And this is a highly controversial topic in town that may never happen, or if it does happen, may be delayed. So I think we should be considering that, and if it happens, great, let's use that money. But we need to consider alternative funding sources as well that might happen a lot sooner or more reliable. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Nat, before we go on, did you want to say something here?
I do, Mary. How'd you know I was pressing the hand thing? You read
Sorry, some people have a very light colored background and the hand doesn't show up very clearly on the background. So
that's me.
sometimes I'm not sure. Yeah.
Gary, thank you so much for this. And thank you for being on Nantucket and getting your feet wet here. Seth just said is 100% true. And I could say a lot more things about stuff like downtown paid parking and the controversy, but I'm not going to get into that. I want to ask Mike or you, I'm not sure who could answer this question, but other sources of revenue. So the ticketing of vehicles downtown, where does that money go? Do you guys know where that goes? Does that go to the state? Does it go to the town? Does it split up? Where does that money go?
So you mean regular parking tickets, Nat?
Right, regular tickets. Yes, sorry.
Don might be able to answer that if
I actually have no idea, and I should know the answer to this question.
and for the record, Don joined us, I think, about 5:45.
Yep, I saw that.
Let me check that.
Yeah.
Because my thought was, like we did with the deeds excise taxes, with the police station, maybe there's a way that we could take a portion of that money and put it towards the this program you guys are talking about. That was just one of my thoughts. The other thought is, if we could ever get our act together with vehicles paying to park in a real parking lot. I mean, two fairgrounds is full, but like when we have a better system, when there's a bus going back and forth to the boats, because we're fighting with ourselves with all this. I mean, you brought up earlier, you're sitting in traffic in the bus. Well, it's faster to sit in traffic in someone else's car, taking them to the boat, than it is to get the bus. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different moving parts with this. So I think there's room for money to be generated without implementing a really controversial, expensive, confusing, negative downtown parking plan, paid parking plan. There's other ways to collect money from things that, in my opinion, are things that we need to be doing. There's also going to be Harbor Place coming on. We still haven't really, flushed out a parking garage. There could end up being a parking garage out of town. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be happening in the future that could generate money for the shuttle. So, but I want to ask you one more question, Gary. When you said that you weren't talking about free, like everything, are you saying that you'd still have bus passes for businesses and things like that? Or are you saying that everybody's free?
Well, what I think what I want to do is to make everyone perfectly clear, so I don't get yelled at walking out of
Right.
my office tomorrow afternoon. I know in no way came on here today to say that the NRTA has put together a plan for fare free on the hands of people parking in town, stating that there is going to be paid parking in town, because I understand right away that it's a very controversial thing. I was not involved in any of the discussion for the years that that's been discussed about. We just
Yeah.
came on to talk. I just wanted to present both sides of the fence on fare free, that there are pluses, there are minuses. The
Yeah.
pluses are people can ride for free and you may increase your ridership. The biggest minus is, yes, they ride for free and the NRTA does not have the money to operate like it did prior. I am in no way coming in saying one way or another that we're going to do it for free. We're putting out the option on both sides so people understand how fare free affects not only the riders, but also the operation of the company. There was a grant last December that the state put out. It was the Tri-Transit grant that was for the month of December. There's a new grant that's out right now called Tri-Transit 2.0, and it's for a much longer period of time that the state will fund to the fare free pilot, as we're calling it. It's not, we're starting fare free. There's a pilot opportunity to see how it affects the operation of the company and if it increases ridership or not. I'm going to present to the advisory board my thoughts on that coming shortly. This is more of just was an informational stats put together to explain how it works.
Yep.
I'm not on either side to say that I expect people to pay for this.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining that if we do it, there's a downside with the upside.
Well, I think, and to expand on what you said earlier about like the speed of keeping it on time and not having to fumble around for 50 cents. I mean, I can see that as being ridiculous. I mean, I don't take the bus, so but I didn't, it was pretty easy to figure out. There's a lot of positives to getting rid of all that stuff that slows people down. However, I just thought about, the part that's easy that people are paying for. So I'm not sure how that could work, but you made a lot of good points and you got my interest with that. So I can see that being something you want to get rid of, but maybe there's future technology that will allow, like, for example, how about cash free? I mean, nobody should be using cash to go on the bus. I mean, you don't go in a parking garage in the city with cash.
Yeah, we're an hour into the meeting. Let's
I
not
know.
go
All
too
right.
far down that rabbit hole.
Thank you.
Dawn, thank you for getting an answer for us if you have one.
Yeah, no problem. It goes directly into the general fund.
Okay.
The current
we
parking
could-
tickets.
Okay.
Can I just quickly, what I envision is that if we could have more extensive bus service that is really reliable and like every 15 minutes getting people around the island, and we could just make it so you can walk on and off the bus, that's probably, in my mind, that is probably the most likely way to fix our traffic problem. But yes, obviously we have to figure out how to pay for it. And I'm, unfortunately, after all of the discussions of paid parking, I'm not currently terribly on board with the entire system of it. So I think we need to figure out a different way. But the biggest complaint that we seem to get on this island are noise complaints and traffic complaints. So we got to figure something out. And I don't think we're putting in a gondola, and I don't think we're putting in a monorail. So the buses, if they were really running so that people could rely on them and for easy transportation rather than hopping in their single occupancy vehicle, I think it's our best bet. But there's a lot more to come on that.
Thank you, Don. Gary, we'll go back to you.
All right, Mike, can you go to the next one? I think we
You covered that.
I think we touched on all the that firestorm. So in the coming weeks, I'm going to be meeting with the advisory board to discuss some options of services for the island. For transportation, one of the things that we're looking at is a micro transit on-demand service. I just want to give a brief overview. There's nothing set in stone or anything, but I just want to explain how micro transit works. A lot of RTAs have switched to micro transit in rural applications, where there isn't the need for a fixed route to run every 30 minutes on the route. The slide explains what it basically is, but in layman terms, what micro transit is it's a software-based system where the rider can get on their smartphone and they can request a ride for service, and it would get sent to microtransit vehicles, whether they're the smaller 12-passenger vans that we have or something else. They would all be wheelchair lift equipped, where they can book a ride and the vehicle goes out and picks them up and brings them into town or to a centralized location. It's not a taxi cab service per se, where you can go wherever you want. They're generally geo-fenced from where the bus route is, where there's certain applications where you're not going to go down dirt roads out to the beaches onto sandy roads or certain areas, but it may be something that I have strong interest in looking into it for off-season use. That there possibly are people in Nantucket that wonder why they don't have access to public transportation. The need is not there to run a fixed route on it. This type of service fulfills their needs when they need a ride to come into town. There could be, we don't serve the airport during the winter months, but there may be people that come in for stroll or certain times that need to be picked up, or an island resident that needs to fly out off the airport, from the airport. And you book your ride, the vehicle picks you up, brings you there, and then it's made available to go to other stops that are booked. And it's all done through a software program that we have currently purchased for the Island Ride service. It's an extension of it that was purchased. We are currently getting the Island Ride service up and running with the new software, and then it's going to transition onto the micro transit to see how it would best work. And to get some feedback on how it would work, but it's an option that I'm looking at doing. And I just wanted to add this in here that it's basically like it states, it's like Uber or Lyft. You set a rate for the ride. It's not based on distance. It's the same rate for, if it's a $3 ride, it's a $3 ride. And it could enhance the operation that we have during the off season and possibly during the summer months as well. So as it shows, the Island Ride can work in concert with the micro transit, where of course it would be priority to people that are registered to use the Island Ride, but during downtimes they would have the tablet in the vehicle with the software system that they could help during downtimes. And we're starting with the Island Ride this off season. It's in the process right now. And, we'll see how quickly it rolls through that process to see the next steps. The alternative is to expand off-season service. I want to look at the park and ride lot. To me, as someone that parked my car over there and I needed to get to the boat, and all the buses were heading the other way when I parked there, and I ended up walking. That I said that maybe there's more of a need for a shuttle to the boats from the lots. So we're gonna look at different things, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna present some items to the board in the coming weeks on some thoughts on what we could do.
Gary, would you just expand a little bit on, you said people who are registered for the Island Ride, what is the registration part of that?
Island Ride is for elderly and disabled. There's age restriction, and then if you're disabled, there's ADA. There's different categories where if you're ADA, you're prioritized that you can't have your trip denied. We also do HST work for the GATRA operates, and it's for people that are on Medicaid that needs transportation to medical appointments or to the boat if they have to go off island, that it's booked through them. It's going to be tied into this software to make it a little bit easier. But for the Island Ride service, it's age restricted, or for disabilities, or if you can't ride the bus, they could check with anybody could check with my office on what the eligibility requirements are. There's a form that has to be filled out, and once you're registered, you're in the system to be able to book trips through the Island Ride service.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that people knew exactly what that was for.
Was there another slide, Mike? Or is that?
No, I think that was it.
That's it for me.
We have
Yeah.
a question from Wendy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick thing related to costs that I wondered is like on the insurance of these, are those smaller buses any significant savings, for example, or any different types of bus? Like, does that impact?
They're based on, they're based on the value of the vehicle. I mean, there is like an umbrella coverage for the liability on it. As we remove some of the older buses that may cost more than a brand new smaller van that we put on, it's all negotiated once a year as we go through, as we set up our insurance program. So, we've added 4 and we've taken 4 vehicles off. So, we didn't increase the number by adding the 4. There was 4 other older buses that we've removed from service now.
And there's not a different, like, higher premium for a propane bus versus diesel versus electric or anything? That's pretty comparable.
Currently not. Surprisingly enough, that you would think that an electric vehicle, there would be a little bit higher because of the risk. It's not a high risk, but there have been some thermal events that have happened with electric vehicles, not many at all. But I mean, the numbers aren't low anyway to insure the vehicles. It's not like insuring your auto. They're a little bit higher, and there's several coverages that we have to have as well.
I wanted to echo Nat's thanks to you, because this is so important and you're clearly dealing with a lot of deferred maintenance. So it's occurring to me, how can we do a better job going forward of supporting this, or like, how can we help brainstorm these costs? I'm not exactly clear of next steps. So I'll be, really eager to see us move forward, because this is really, really important and great. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other questions or comments for Gary? Gary, you have my thanks. I am just completely impressed at the volume of issues that you are dealing with in your first year here and how well you're moving forward on solving them. So thank you.
Thank you for having me tonight. We got a long way to go, but we're going to get there, and Mike's going to help me get a lot of money.
All right, Mike, on to your portion of the program. I want to also ask Raisa Kwame from Mass DOT. Is there anything that you wanted to add regarding the NRTA?
I just wanted to echo your comments and just thank Gary for all the partnership with MassDOT.
Thank you. All
Thank
right,
you.
Mike, on to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a few items on the Transportation Manager report. One thing needs action concerning the Safe Streets and Roads for All. There's a Mass DOT agreement in the packet for matching funds to the federal grant that was received. The agreement with Mass DOT is for the 20% matching funds. The amount of the agreement is $115,000. The term of the agreement runs through the end of June of 2025. And this request is to authorize the Director of Planning to sign and execute the Safe Streets for All matching funds agreement with Mass DOT. And Risa could probably add anything that I missed in that explanation, but we just like to execute the agreement for the matching funds now that we have the contract for the main grant from the federal highway.
Comments or questions on this item for Mike? If there are none, we'll take a motion to authorize the Director of Planning to sign and execute the Safe Streets for All matching funds agreement with Mass DOT.
So moved.
Thank you, Nat.
Second,
Thank you, Don. Roll call vote, Seth Engelbard.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella has just joined us. Christy, are you able to vote on this motion?
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. Don Holgate,
aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
John Trudell,
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm
Sorry, that
not
was
going to-
Christy coming in at, I think, 6:10 for the record. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I'm going to skim through the contract. I don't think we need to read that to everyone, but it's there for informational purposes. I also have a few slides just for an update on the 3C program, which I'll skim over a lot of this if that's all right, and happy to answer any questions at the end on this. As you might know, staff did participate in the Southern New England Conference in New Haven and learned a lot about resiliency, historic preservation, and equity. That was a very rewarding conference to attend. You should let the NPC know that likely at the January meeting, there will be a request to initiate a 45-day public review to amend the public participation plan. We're waiting on guidance from Mass DOT on some of those requirements that need to be included in that update. Gary did note the need to amend the TIP for bus replacements, and we do have some Title VI updates to the website that we're working on to get done by the end of the calendar year. As far as planning priorities, just let you know that staff is coordinating with the town on trying to sync the NPDC goals for transportation with the town's strategic goals for transportation. Should let the commission know that regarding the regional safety action plan, that request for proposals is currently out and closes tomorrow. So we should get some our proposals to start reviewing tomorrow, and hope to start that action plan project by the 1st of December. And there are a number of different initiatives that BPAC is reviewing. Our meeting last week actually had to get canceled. We didn't have a chair or vice chair for that meeting. So nothing to report from BPAC other than we're looking at design options for a variety of projects. And I'll skip over these items here. Nothing necessarily new to report other than what's in the narrative at the end of this material. Also, as a quick update for capital projects, approved capital projects, milestone road improvements, Mass DOT did review the intersections for our intersection improvements at the Milestone Rotary and the milestone at Noble Deer Farm Road intersections. As you might recall, those were submitted as needs. And those were reviewed by their project review committee. So those will be initiated soon. Milestone Road itself, that'll be that project will be submitted in December. So just want to update you on that, and note that they're the variety of other projects for Tom Nevers, Pleasant Street, Sparks Avenue, and Wawanet. They're all in process of surveying and design options with not much new to report other than staff will be bringing those to future meetings with design recommendations for you to vote on. And staff is also coordinating with the town's finance department on updating their capital plan of capital projects for out years to ensure that the town's local capital plan is synced with the long range transportation plan for the region. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments for Mike?
I have one. Sorry,
Okay.
Mary, I didn't press the button. Mike, what's this board? What's the boardwalk option? I've heard that one. How did I miss that?
There is a section of Tom Nevers Road, and I'm between south of Lyons and north of, I'm flaking on the names of the roadways, but there's a short section through Land Bank property that's a very low-lying area. The designer of record did propose either making a causeway through that low-lying area or doing a boardwalk so that you can actually see users of the path at street level, since it's such a low-lying area. That was brought to the Land Bank Commission to consider, and they actually supported it. And BPAC reviewed it. There was verbal support, but I don't have a final motion just yet. But there seemed to be a lot of interest in the board, a couple of 100 feet of boardwalk through Land Bank property over a low-lying area. For the main reason was it was more interesting, if nothing else. So I want to say, Joe Topham, were you at that meeting when we gave the presentation? It seemed like there was universal appeal for that as an option.
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was great. It's really going to be kind of fun to do that if you're riding down that road, to be at street level. But I think it was between Lyons and Parsons. Is that right?
Yes.
But it's on the left-hand side. It's like a deep, 10-foot.
Like a swale years ago. Yeah. Okay, I got you. I just was curious, like somehow that I don't remember ever talking about this before. So that's good. Great.
Mike's got us looking good.
Whatever works, as long as we do something someday. Getting old.
Okay, we also have a member of the public with their hand up, and because we covered so much information between Gary and Mike, I will go ahead and take a question. Charles Stott, Nikki, can you promote him to panelist? And Charlie, you may have to click a button to unmute yourself. Charlie, you're going to have to unmute on your own. You have been promoted to panelist if you also want to turn on your video. That's your option.
All right, I'm not finding the video icon. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can hear you though, so that's good.
But I was raising my hand for the next agenda item.
Oh, all right. So I expect that we will come back to you. There will be public discussion on the next agenda item. So just hang tight, and we'll have the commissioners comment first and then go to the public. Okay, if there are no other questions on the Transportation Program Manager's update, thank you, Mike, and thank you again, Gary, and thank you, Raisa, for joining us. We will move on to the public discussion of area plan guidelines. Can we put that, I don't know if we need to put that on, that was something like 60 pages, that there may not be value in trying to display that on the screen. But I do want to make an introductory comment. First of all, I want to thank all of the groups and individuals who submitted comments. They are really appreciated, and they'll help us clarify and fine tune the guidelines. There were multiple requests for a meeting with NP and EDC on the guidelines. It may not have been clear, and I apologize if it wasn't, but this is the meeting where the public was invited to participate in that discussion. We won't be scheduling a dozen individual meetings with various interested individuals and groups. So I'm glad to see that there are members of the public in attendance here. It's apparent from the comments that there are several misconceptions, and before we begin discussion, I want to give some background on how and why these guidelines were developed. In its enabling legislation, the NPNEDC is assigned the responsibility for creating local area plans. These plans are developed separately from the master plan, which is statutorily the responsibility of the planning board. Naturally, the master plan informs the area plans and vice versa. However, it's not a deadline or a requirement that each neighborhood have or update an area plan prior to updating of the master plan. The two processes run in parallel and on separate timelines. In accordance with best practices for planning, the NPNEDC desires to have significant grassroots public involvement in the creation of area plans, even though the ultimate authority remains with the NPNEDC to approve the area plans. Fortunately, there are many active neighborhood associations on the island to help facilitate public engagement. However, as a public body, the NPNEDC is bound by the open meeting law, and those constraints must apply to its work groups. Importantly, work group members must refrain from accidentally or purposely having a quorum of work group members discuss the development of the area plan outside of a properly noticed public meeting. The area plan work groups are not subcommittees of the neighborhood associations. They're subcommittees of the NPNEDC. Members of neighborhood associations may, of course, have their own discussions regarding issues in their neighborhoods. However, these aren't exempt from open meeting law if a quorum of work group members are present or could reasonably be expected to be involved. Additionally, though public outreach during formation, through public outreach during the formation of the work group, the NPNEDC will strive to include representatives from across the community who have interest in the area, regardless of whether they are members of a neighborhood association. And that will also help allow flexibility for private conversations that don't violate open meeting law. The NPNEDC will prioritize the selection of work group members who have an active interest in an area through their residency, property ownership, or commercial activities in the development of a local area plan work group for the neighborhood, especially members of the public who are not already serving the town in elected, volunteer, or employment capacity and other leadership roles. That latter preference is intended to ensure that the public's voice isn't overshadowed by or intimidated by the influence a community leader may have. Notwithstanding these priorities, the NPNEDC will select what it feels is the best makeup for an area plan work group from the pool of interested applicants. In the spirit of grassroots participation, work group members will be selected to represent their personal, not their professional interests. The use of professional services, if deemed necessary, should be coordinated through and approved by the planning director, and professional service providers will not have a voting or membership role in a work group. Notwithstanding, again, those priorities, any individual who has an interest through residence, property ownership, or commercial operations is eligible to serve as a work group member to represent that interest, subject to the NPNEDC's approval of their work group membership. The guidelines we are developing are intended to make work groups aware of the resources available to them, reduce their administrative burden, and understand the requirements of the laws that apply to them. Some of the comments claimed some guidelines were unworkable. These comments are important to follow up on to determine if changes in the guidelines or additional resources are necessary excuse me, to be provided from the NPNEDC to enable the work groups to function effectively. The guidelines are also meant to establish a standard process for every area plan work group to follow, which has not happened in the past, while still allowing the NPNEDC to tailor the process to suit individual circumstances, needs, and resources in each neighborhood. So I tried to address what many of the comments talked about. I hope that that was helpful for an introduction. Would like to take comments from commissioners first, and then we will go to the public. Do commissioners have any additional comments for the area plan guidelines or the comments we received on them? Wendy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for clarification, you say this meeting was intended to be that public meeting, but you acknowledge that there's confusion about that. Can you elaborate on, do you mean that this is still the meeting for the public, or do you mean that there might be a follow-up? Just if I'm confused, I imagine the public is confused.
I think that's still an open question depending on how this discussion goes. I certainly see the potential need for additional dialogue, but we'll have to see what the reaction is of those people who requested it.
Thank you.
They may be able to satisfy their curiosity here. Not seeing comments from commissioners. Charlie, you have already been promoted to panelist, and if there are any other members of the public with comments, please do go ahead and raise your hand. Charlie, before we go to you, let's go to Leslie, though she has her hand raised. Leslie Snell.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that I, totally agree with your sort of preamble to this discussion, but I think it's really important based on a lot of the comments that we received to make it clear that, these guidelines were meant for consistency across all of the area plan work groups. They're meant to make sure that the area plan work groups are in compliance with the open meeting law and our boards and committees manual and those kinds of things. They weren't meant to stifle public comment or to discourage people from participating. It's really quite the opposite. Like, we want to encourage participation, but we want to make sure that it's done in a legal manner. So I think maybe there was some confusion about that. And I just want the public to understand that, the commission does want people to participate. We just have to make sure that we're complying with all applicable state laws.
Thank you, Leslie. Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name is Charles Stott, and I'm co-president of the Nantucket Civic League, a federation of 25 neighborhood associations with about 2,000 members. You've received remarks from at least 5 of these associations expressing questions and concerns about the proposed area plan guidelines. The Civic League also sent correspondence requesting that the commission defer consideration of the proposed guidelines. We also requested that prior to any action on the proposed guidelines, one or more representatives of the Planning and Economic Development Commission meet with the Civic League to explain and respond to questions about the local area planning process and the rationale for these guidelines. In addition to the associations that commented on the guidelines, at least 6 more of our associations sent you letters endorsing a deferral of consideration. The Civic League seeks to assist our local neighborhood communities in understanding the local area process as it relates to the development of the town master plan. We request that the guidelines be presented and explained to the Civic League and local association leaders before the people impacted can comment meaningfully. We respectfully ask the NP and EDC to include in the presentations citations to statutory or regulatory requirements and the rationale for discretionary policy provisions of the guidelines. We favor conducting the meeting on Zoom, recording it so that it can be made available to our Civic League NCTV channel and to provide information to those who cannot attend. In sum, neither the Civic League nor our area association leaders have expertise in the town's local area planning process. To comment meaningfully, we needed an updated presentation by planning officials responsible for implementing the process. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Charlie. Do we have other members of the public in attendance who have comments on the area plan guidelines? Bruce Mandel. Bruce, hang on while we promote you to presenter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm struggling turning on the video. I'm sorry, but we've sent you a list of several dozen comments based on the proposed draft area guidelines with comments. And I hope some of the commissioners had a chance to read these because it wasn't posted until a few days ago. And there's quite a list of other documents that are posted with comments, but one of the overriding comments is that, and the chair mentioned this, and Ms. Snell mentioned it also about adhering to the open meeting law and other applicable requirements. I want to impress upon everyone that at no time have at least our groups in Nantucket received any training in the open meeting law or its requirements. There have been discussions about being, I don't know how you would describe it, Madam Chair, but I think you referenced it, that we are like employees or subgroups of NPEDC. And in the past, when I have volunteered to work at various town organizations, we've had to take HR courses and exams and get certified. The open meeting law guidelines that I downloaded, they're hundreds of pages, and there's an actual certification form that's supposed to be submitted. Our area plan work group's liaison, Joe Topham, was kind enough to provide us with some links to several YouTube presentations about the open meeting law. They're each more than an hour long, and they basically are PowerPoint presentations that need to be accompanied by a slide presentation explanation of each slide. And we haven't had the opportunity as a group to do that. There are other required certifications to be quote unquote town employees. I have it on reference that town council doesn't necessarily include advisory work groups like ours as quote unquote town employees. So there's a lot of detail to be cleaned up before any kind of vote tonight. And I want to support what Mr. Stott said. This is very complicated. We need time to understand what you're trying to accomplish. On the surface, there are some aspects that are quite restrictive in terms of how we can deal with things and present things to you. We understand the quorum issue. And in our case, you know, that's not a big threshold. It's about 7 or 8 people would create a quorum. So it's not a big task to stay under that. But the issue is not to try to circumvent what we're trying to understand is the open meeting law, but without any kind of a class or presentation about the open meeting law, how it works, how it's monitored, what our responsibilities are, what the responsibilities of other folks are. It's hard to comply with something that you haven't been taught about. And I hope you all realize that that's an important threshold. So I would hope that the commissioners have all had a chance to review the 59 pages of submissions in the packet. And would hopefully, if the commissioners have any questions about, for example, the comments that the Nantucket work group submitted, we would appreciate the opportunity to discuss those with you, rather than them simply filed away as, oh, thank you very much, you submitted comments, we're moving on. That would be rather offensive, and it wouldn't accomplish what we're trying to do in trying to work together to create area plans that, as Ms. Snell said, are consistent with each other and that form the basis for a good update of the town master plan. So thank you very much, and we would welcome any questions that the commissioners have on the documentation that we submitted to you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. And let me respond. First of all, I generally agree with everything you said. It's my understanding that someone who volunteers for a committee has the personal responsibility to familiarize themselves with open meeting law and the requirements for service on a committee. And the town makes those resources available and follows up with the statement that needs to be submitted by that individual, certifying that they have reviewed the resources. I think that COVID kind of threw a wrench in that. I don't know if that affected your group specifically, but it's certainly a reason for these guidelines is to help make people aware of those responsibilities and to help make sure that those requirements are met consistently by every group that is subject to them. I will say I read through all 59 pages twice of comments. I wanted to make sure that I understood where we were seeing things that were, causing concern, and especially from more than one source. And that was part of why I wanted to make the statement at the beginning to address some of those either misconceptions or questions. And there were several things that I thought were pointed out that were that should be incorporated into the guidelines. As I said, I do thank everybody for submitting the comments. In terms of the Nantucket group specifically, because your work group is underway, I think that we should have that meeting with Leslie and with myself and with a couple of people from the Nantucket work group to help figure out how the guidelines will apply in your group's particular circumstance. As I said, we do want the flexibility to customize how each group is able to work according to its circumstances. So I hope that we will get that scheduled for the Nantucket group. Bruce, was there anything else that you wanted to address? I see your hand is still up.
Yes, I re-raised my hand. Thank you very much. One thing is, you made a comment that there's sort of an inherent responsibility for the volunteer members of a group like, for example, the Nantucket area advisory work group to take it on their own to research the requirements, for example, of the open meeting law. And that's quite a daunting process for us, a volunteer group to try to do, especially when it's a 14 or 16 member group.
But Bruce, you're not required to research it on your own. The town provides all of the resources.
How can we?
You are required to review them.
I mean, it would be convenient to know how to contact those resources, as you say. We're not looking to create problems. We're looking to work together.
Right. The town clerk's office should have sworn each individual member of the work group in and should have provided them with a list of resources. And again, I don't know whether that happened. We certainly could get you caught up if it didn't.
Members have been sworn in at all. I'm quite familiar with the swearing in process, having been a volunteer at the clerk's office. I know how that works. Not a single member of our volunteer work group, which has been in existence for several years, has ever been sworn in, nor have we been told, here are your resources, here are your contacts. This is quite serious for us. And we would like to have as much cooperation as possible, as well as have our comments addressed that you spent quite a bit of time reading, which I appreciate you doing, because it took quite a bit of time to compile those and embed the comments into the various sections of the guidelines for your ease of reference. So this is very important to us, but it's not, I don't think I'm understating it when I say it's not easy.
I think I understand what you're saying, Bruce, and we are committed to, helping the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group do their work and in a proper fashion. One of the reasons for the guidelines is so that oversights don't happen. It appears that one has happened in your case. We want to rectify that.
And you know that there was a comment made at a prior NPEDC meeting that you felt that there might have been some misunderstandings with our group, and that you were suggesting that we have, in the term you used, a chat session. And we've written to you guys saying, yeah, we want the chat session. Here are some dates that we can do it at. We haven't heard back, although we did hear back that there was one comment that the dates we provided were too soon. But we still want to have that chat, which is different than the discussion you're just now mentioning, to clear up what you called misrepresentations or misunderstandings. I'm sorry, you call misunderstandings. And we'd like to hear back so we could set up that meeting too. These are important, and we are taking the initiatives to reach out to you, but it's not an easy thing to coordinate the results. So we would appreciate somehow that happening.
I'm agreeing with you, Bruce, and you're right. It's not easy on our end to coordinate either. The initial dates that you suggested, unfortunately, were not dates that we had available. But we do want to have that meeting. We will try and schedule that with you, and fingers crossed it works out sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think really kind of what the problem was is 2006, the Nantucket area group was able to work kind of freely. And I think that we started this process and we're moving along, and the guidelines weren't quite finalized, but we shared them just to get a heads up and let them know that this would be coming. And I felt that there was just kind of a little bit of surprise that this was coming in. I think it's the right thing to say, here are the open meeting law problems that could potentially happen, and education. But the moment after the meeting that I had with the Nantucket area plan, I reached out to Erica Mooney at the town administration's office, and she gave the links, and I immediately gave them on to Bruce to pass along. But the other thing that Erica is working on right now is, and you brought this up, Madam Chair, is that, we used to have Copeman and Page, a law firm, come down, and the woman was Laura Goldberg, if I remember correctly. And she came down and she held a seminar at 4 Fairgrounds Road, and it was fantastic. You could ask questions. And, if I'm at a cocktail party or I'm on the street and at the, post office, and I run in and everyone's there at the same time, like what happens? And I think that that's something that we're looking to do, make it a little bit easier. I agree the links I gave are a little bit substantial, but I also think that, going back to Bruce's comment, where in 2006, they were just able to work. And now it's like, well, we kind of have to bring a little bit more formality and work within the town guidelines. And so I think that's kind of where they're coming at. I think they're just kind of caught off guard. And I don't think anything is undaunting or unfixable. I don't think any work we've really done to this date would be undone. I just think that we need to get people sworn in. We need to have Laura Goldberg come down and do the presentation, which is great. And I recommend everyone and anyone that has anything to do with the town to sit in that room, because it is fantastic. Robert's rules, you name it, it just goes through everything. And I was fortunate to sit in every year her presentation because I was on the Concom. And I just highly recommend that everyone go forward. And I mean, we've got Charlie Stott and the rest of the groups and 26 neighborhoods association, or 29, whatever it is. I think get the word out that, hey, everyone can show up, everyone be present for this, because I think it's really going to help. And Bruce, I think that you're doing a really good job at the first meeting and did everything that was required of you, and taking the votes properly, and did a really good job. And I think that was a good turning around the corner. And I really like that was working in our favor for the Nantucket area group. So thank you, Evan, for your time.
Thank you, Joe. We do have 2 members of the public with their hands up. We'll go to Barry first, and Nikki, while he's talking, can you bring in David Ernst? Barry, you're saying you'll wait, I think.
I'm good, because I'd really like to kind of coalesce what the public's going to wind up saying, but I do want to circle back on a few things. Thank you.
All right, David Ernst, and then we'll go to Ben Flipsky when David is finished.
Yep, thank you very much. Shifting gears a little bit, 2 related questions. One, when all of the local area plans are done, what is the practical effect on our life? Does it drive regulation? What are the teeth that will attach to them? In other words, what's the prize for all this work? And then the second question is what's the urgency to get this done, and the timeline going forward as you see it?
David, I'm going to ask Leslie to address some of those questions, but first I'm going to make a comment. In a manner of speaking, area plans are never done. They're always available to be updated as circumstances warrant. And one of the issues that I wasn't previously aware of, but it was helpful to have the comments to make me aware of, was that area plans have been taking years to go from start to finish. And as more areas are interested in producing a plan, that's becoming a problem. And that's something that I think I need to discuss with the director of planning, is to see what we can do to facilitate more rapid development of area plans. There is not a specific timeline at the moment. It's more needs-based. So having said that, can I call on Leslie to answer some of your other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I hope I hit them all. The area plans are advisory in nature. They follow the same format as the master plan at a neighborhood level. So they're not regulatory, they're advisory. They are meant to impact decision-making across all town boards, committees, offices. I can think of specific examples where recommendations coming out of area plans have impacted zoning changes that were brought forward, where they may have impacted transportation improvements, perhaps infrastructure improvements. There's a services and facilities section. So, the other towns and committees and boards are encouraged to look at the area plan when they're looking at specific neighborhoods where an area plan exists. And I think it is really helpful. It's your opportunity as an area to have a voice coming from the people who live there and own businesses there and the people who are most impacted. As far as a timeline, there's not a specific timeline. I think some recent ones have lagged a bit. We used to provide more staff support to the area plans, and that at some point in time just became something that we couldn't manage with other demands. So, as Mary said, she and I need to have a discussion about what we can do to help move these forward in a more timely manner and get them wrapped up so we can get to other area plans. I think I got all your questions.
You did. Thank you both very much. That's very helpful.
And David, if you don't mind, would you tell us for the record, are you affiliated with a particular area or just speaking as a member of the public?
Both. So I live in Monomoy. I very recently joined the Monomoy Civic Association board. I've been coming here since age 1, so I'm also a member of the public and interested in the island. Thank you very much for your work here.
Lynn Filipski, and then we'll go to Wendy.
Hi, I just thought I would comment as the past chair of the Sconset Area Plan. You have my letter that I wrote to the committee, so I'm sure you're pretty much up to date. But I just wanted to point out there are advantages to using the Civic Association boards or members as an integral part, if not the organizer of the group, only because we have the most contacts and relevant work where we have interfaced with the town itself, whether it's the police department, the DPW, the planning department, zoning department. And so when you look at how you are going to decide who is on this committee, it kind of begs the question of why isn't any civic association integral to this from the beginning as it was in the past? Only because we also have resources that you do not have to share with us, such as we created a survey monkey to go through all the questions that we would need answers for from residents so that we could create an area plan that reflected the public. And I would say having public meetings, sharing the information that we had and asking for further comments was also relevant. And people on our group included commercial owners, land people like the Sconset Trust who have a substantial amount of property in Sconset. So I would encourage you to revisit that as a member that is important to any of these planning. If there's a land bank, NCF, Sconset Trust, they all should be at the table if they're part of your area. So in terms of resources, we just had more resources than the planning department could give us. And our liaison was basically Andrew Vorse, who had a real job and not really available on a month-to-month basis to sit on our committee. So we spent a lot of time committing updates to Leslie and Andrew to keep them on the same plane with us. And I understand why you were trying to formalize this in a way that adheres to other boards within the town, but it is advisory. It is no different from, let's say, the Sconset Historic Group that gave advisory information. I don't think there's a problem making it an open meeting and following the guidelines. I think it's a problem when you have 6 to 8 members who may have to change the time on the fly when someone can't be a participant. And then that really impacts how you can keep the public involved. So whether you create a recorded version that anyone can see and respond to through an email account, I would find totally relevant and inclusive of the public. So before you really nail down what everything is going to work, I think you just have to look at each area is so individual that you have to meet them not in a grossly overview that should respond to everyone. It really has to be more who has the resources, who has the time, how complicated is the area in terms of conservation or coastal resiliency or population, traffic. And for Sconset, it was easy in a way because every single one of those elements related for us. Not every group has that. Quidnet would have maybe 2 that are relevant for a master plan. And so you may want to delineate between an area that meets all those areas to review versus those that don't, that have 2 or 3 key things that govern that space. So I'm an advocate for the Civic Association. When we were told in 2020 that the town wanted us to update our original plan, we did it within a year, and we met maybe every 3 weeks and then by Zoom. And I think that way still works. And I urge you to come up with a hybrid of your idea and how the other civic associations have responded. And we're beyond this. It would impact us in the future, but our area plan's already been accepted. But you caught the other groups halfway through what the original 2020 mission to start doing an area plan, and through no fault of their own, there weren't enough people in the planning department to be assigned to be the liaison. They're now struggling to switch halfway into a different mode. So I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, and I think there are ways to make it more responsive to the area and yet fulfill the wish for some uniformity. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you. And I want to clarify that there is no intent to remove or restrict neighborhood associations from this process. And we rely heavily on the contacts that you have and the knowledge of your community. And this is the whole point of why area plans are useful, is to get that local, resident or, somebody with another interest in that area, whether it's a conservation land owner or a business owner, involved in this process. There's no plan to stop doing that. And I'm not quite sure where that impression came from, but I want to make sure that it's very clear that we would intend to, for a large part, continue the process the way that it has been done in the past. However, it must conform with open meeting law. There's no flexibility on that. That's a law. And so these guidelines, again, are intended to inform people of the resources that the NP and EDC will make available. We do have the SurveyMonkey account or other survey software. We do have other resources available. We certainly want to assist the work groups with those. You're not out there on your own. You have our help. And that's the message we're trying to get across. So I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. It's just when you read the initial document, it sounds like you are taking control out of who the members will be without recognizing your key partner is the Civic Association in most cases. And I think that if you could clarify that a little bit more, it would take away a lot of the, I'll call it anxiety. Just really spell out who you think the partners are in the best position to be part of this. And because I had been the president at the same time as at the Civic Association, it fell to me to organize and get approval from Andrew Vorse and do all the steps that you asked us to do. He had told us because it was a revision or an update that there would be no need to have an open meeting context for us. So if you want to clarify that in the future, that I think would be key. And it is doable. It is complicated, but it is doable. So thank you. I'm very glad to hear civic associations do a lot for the island, and they represent not only residents who live there legally voting, they also represent a substantial amount of non-resident taxpayers. So their input is one of the few ways that they can communicate is through an area plan. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Lynn. Wendy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't mean to jump ahead of Barry, but would you like to go ahead, Barry? Okay, I just had a couple of things. First, I wanted to sort of ask a follow-up question, perhaps, to the purpose of the area plans and the timeliness of them. It was a little bit of my understanding that we wanted as many of those done before the master plan, process. Okay, Barry's shaking his head. So no. So I guess maybe we're spending so much time on the area plan conversation, and I'd love to see how that fits in with the master plan. And it's occurring to me that it's a moment. I mean, I was psyched to see 60 pages of, involvement. That was really great. And the Civic League is invaluable in rallying the troops, as Lynn pointed out, in the past. And it's feeling like a moment to me, much as, when we did the last big master plan push in 99, 2000, and all the meetings we had at the high school and all that stuff, I felt like it was really helpful for the community. And, we'll get through this next special town meeting, et cetera. But I just wonder if we might consider gathering people a little bit more. I mean, we all know how I don't love Zooms. So I miss the old days, and it really brought a lot of people, myself very much included, to being involved in the public process and civic association. So I guess long-winded question. Barry shook his head. I mean, maybe, Leslie or, Madam Chair, you can clarify how this fits in, or also just, I'd love to know a little bit more what we're looking at for the master plan process. Thanks.
I think Barry, being a member of the planning board, and it is the planning board that is in charge of the master plan, is probably in a good position to speak next. So Barry, if you will.
That's why I took that as a.
Thank you. And thank you, Wendy. And Leslie, you're going to catch me if I mess up here at this point. There's a lot of territory to cover that's just come up, but let me try to cover a few bases here at the moment. The master plan does kind of rely upon what we pull out from area plans, absolutely, but the two are independent of each other as well. We don't need, if the master plan were dependent upon all these area plans in place, it would be taking more than 10 years worth of time. So we, again, we like to feel like we've got a good pulse of what's going on in the community. This is too, like when we do the master plan, we also ask for engagement through the public, but our areas of focus sometimes are a little bit different. We're not in a master plan. there may not be as much minutiae that go on that would necessarily be reflected from the area plans. So the two they function independently of each other. That's what I'm going to say. They utilize information from very different sources. But realistically, they still function rather independently from each other. And do bear that in mind. The master plan. I'm going to stop there for a second because I know I'm not prepared to get too deep into that. But I do want to say there are differences that are between the two and how they are being looked at. When we're doing a master plan too, like if we're looking at transportation, we may be looking at a holistic system of how everything functions on the island. Whereas an area plan's just drilling into a small subsect of that. And so, yeah, that's nice to know, but when it comes time to look at the bigger picture, here we go again. That information is interesting, but is it necessarily well coordinated against everything else? It's a little hard to say. But I just want to dispel that because that kind of seems to be a generating myth that the two are intimately locked to each other. They're not. Would you agree, Leslie? Just yes, no.
I do agree, and I have a couple of things to add on that as far as the area plans that may need to be updated.
No, it's okay. I just want to circle back afterwards. That's okay.
Yeah, why don't you jump in and we'll go back to Mary.
Yeah.
No, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
We're talking about.
You had a couple other things that you wanted to add on to Barry's description of the master plan process.
Yeah. So the master plans the area plans that may be in the process of being updated. I mean, I think that would be good if we could wrap those up in advance of the master plan update being completed. But, as Barry said, there's certainly, intertwined, but timing wise, not highly dependent upon each other. Otherwise, it would always be this, chicken and egg thing, like which one do we finish first? Which one needs to be revised first? And the planning board did recently vote to endorse my recommendation for a consultant, Judy Barrett and her planning group, to update the master plan. I'm working with finance right now on a contract for that to present to the select board for approval. And I don't have that handy because I didn't expect that to come up, but I think the process on that's around a year. Could be a little more, could be a little less, with lots of public engagement built in. We talked a lot about how Mike's update recently to the long range transportation plan got a lot more public interest and public comment than it ever has in the past. And so we really want to build on that with the master plan process.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Leslie. Barry?
Yeah, so, another thing too is that there's also the myth that a master plan must be done every 10 years. Let's put that to rest as well too, because when you lay out a master plan and start evolving pieces of it, some of them may take a little bit more time when you're making changes or proposed changes into the future. Perfect example is RC2 and that phasing out of that district. It was a pretty big district, but you also have to spend the time with neighborhoods, helping them and working with them. And sometimes they may not be ready to deal with that right at that moment, but a year or two later, after consideration, they think about it. So I want to be clear that it moves along and it should be moving along. There always should be a timely set of marks with it, but you also have to figure out where you're at in that process and not just say, oh, it's 10 years, we got to do it no matter what. It's a sensical approach to how to deal with the things that you've proposed and the town says, okay, we're good with that. I want to circle back too, because again, there's some real misperceptions floating around out there. The open meeting law thing, there are a number of individuals who come on board in the town who don't get their open meeting law training till well later on. They're given places to turn to. There are constructive dialogues with the staff as well too about that. Not everything gets covered, but we would certainly, I love hearing about the fact that people really want to do it. It's just a matter of timing when when town council finally decides they're going to put on another seminar. But there are resources out there that we can turn you to. And this is another big thing. This is why we have an advisor or a liaison to the group who should almost always be there. That's such an important thing. They're there to kind of help keep focused, not only the direction by way of the elements that are put in place for it, but to make sure that things aren't running afoul at times as well too. Again, because we are a government agency, we're bound by that and most other things that we do as subsets. Let me just through you to Mr. Mandel. Do you mind?
That's probably not appropriate, given that we're going to have a meeting with the Nantucket Area Plan Group. I think any communication should be reserved.
Okay. I guess what we need to kind of check what's going on at times, because I don't think every group that people are affiliated with, especially town groups, are going through the OML process. It makes me question that. And so we may need to ask a few more questions. The thing is that what I really want to stress, which I think got lost in the process, was that there's a very specific reason why we have the area groups engage with staff and engage with their advisors as well too, their liaisons, so that we as a board, when we're accepting things, and mind you, when we put a seal of approval on this thing, it carries a little bit of weight. It really does. Not everything is necessarily going to be within our purview to agree with. There was one plan that I know that was about to launch lawsuits that would have been really devastating if we had signed on board with that. So, those are the things that we need to be highly aware of that's out there. The Civic League is another conversation unto itself, but we also like to be engaged with the fact that we need to kind of have a good feel for who's coming on board. Left to its own devices at times, without that, it could be you and your 10 best friends. And you're all meaning very, very well, but that may not be the best mix of individuals that can be out there at this point. I've also had other organizations come on board too, who have very different missions than what I would call in conjunction with the town. And again, that can be problematic. So there's a lot of things, and what we're trying to do, I think, here is put our house together and in order. We're trying to move things along to where there's more clarity. It may not seem like that way at first. And also make sure that we're in compliance with things that are, part of our mandate as being a town entity. Let me leave it there. There's a lot more territory here that needs to be covered.
Well, let's try and stay within the area plan guidelines and not get too far afield. But thank you, Barry.
Respectfully, Madam Chair, that it all touches upon the area guidelines at this point. You and I could have that discussion later, but it really was meant to stay within the context of the area guidelines. And these are things that have come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, on the area plan guidelines, this is a discussion agenda item. There's not intended to be a vote tonight. So is there any further comment on the area plan guidelines for either from members of the public or from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to a discussion of the enabling legislation and the membership positions. Megan or Nikki, would you put the attendees back in the attendee mode rather than the presenter mode, please? And then when you're ready, we can display the handout that came with this agenda item. So Leslie and I brainstormed, and I want to stress the word brainstorm, that's the level at which we're operating right now, a list of roles that could potentially be helpful to the membership of the NP and EDC. I want to make sure that everybody is aware that these organizations listed have not been approached. They have not been invited. There has not been an individual representative identified. This is simply coming up with ideas. And that is the spirit in which this is presented. Okay, the question of how many is probably the last question we'd need to address. So we have a list of the organizations currently represented on the NP and EDC, a list of potential positions for consideration. Again, that was the brainstorming that Leslie and I did. And then for reference, the positions that NP and EDC representatives hold on other committees. So from the commissioners, do you have other suggestions for groups that may beneficially be represented in NP and EDC as we consider our membership? Or other suggestions on how to proceed with discussion on this topic? Wendy?
I mean, this is a big one. I wondered, I'd be a little bit question the other boards and committees that the currently people are on other things. I feel like that's, well, it's not complete. I wondered the benefit of that, or are these only the things that are within as NP and EDC official? Yeah, I guess I see that.
If you're looking at the
More
last,
specifically, I feel like when I joined the NP and EDC, we definitely had a DPW person for a very long time. Did we not have a marine home center and a hospital person back in those days? Okay. So that was not NP and EDC.
maybe
No.
Commerce.
What was that? Probably a downtown revital. I don't know. Some committee was on. But
Wendy, we were on the chamber board together. I think that was the chamber board.
Chamber for sure. That was those people.
Okay.
Yes. And it was always a weird thing to me. Like, why do they get that? Just because of the scale of their business. So there's a little bit of that's tying into this too, as I'm trying to think who it should be. I'm wondering if you mean by Chamber of Commerce, do you mean a person from the business community? Like, we don't really have an active merchants association, restaurant association,
Right. So again, this is a brainstorming level.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to suggest an additional group, such as a merchants association, if we had one,
right,
that would be the appropriate suggestion. But we have not gone any deeper than what is on the screen here. So we haven't said, well, if it's from this group, it ought to be the president, or if it's from that group, it ought to be a member of the board, or anything like that. We haven't gone that deep.
I'm going through this with two other nonprofit boards that I'm on right now too. And you're trying to do we need a lawyer? Or do we need of this, that, and the other? It's like, really, like, whose voices are we missing here? And as the demographics of the island have changed a lot, there's a lot to that piece that could be relevant. But I feel like, I think my question a little bit about the other things we're associated with and whether there's value in trying to find a person that's really touching other organizations on the island, if that's important or not. All right.
Well,
yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
Remind me if you can, Wendy, to come back to that comment. I don't want to take the discussion in a different direction right now, but I do have something else to add to that.
Oh, specifically, sorry, the Chamber of Commerce, were you thinking somebody from the Chamber of Commerce, or was that a token business type?
It hasn't gone any. So if you wanted, it would be perfectly appropriate right now to add a bullet point under potential positions to say business person.
Okay, even though there's not an actual organization that they would be representing.
Right.
That's where I was going. Okay. Well, I would suggest that because I feel like that's valuable.
Yeah. So after Council on Aging, if somebody's able to edit the document on the screen, we would add another bullet that's just right now would simply say business person. Can we get an edit while you're there? And are there other commissioners with additional ideas? Nat?
Yeah, I mean, I have to chime in a little bit here. So when you guys wrote up at the top 9 or 11, well, we're at 11 now. So if we add something, that's more than 11. So you must be thinking about.
Right, the question of how many is going to be the last question we address.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
not going to drive the discussion.
Okay.
So this is brainstorming. We could
Right.
end up with 21 and then
Yeah,
we
well,
talk about
that's
how many.
sort of what I was gonna say, I think, because the DPW thing, we know what there's still an ex officio position that he could come on anytime, he or she, whoever the director is, could come on any meeting they wanted and be right here with us. So that was, for a real reason at the time. But I don't think we should hold ourselves to a number, but I do agree that the land bank definitely needs to be a member. What Wendy just brought up is interesting, actually. There's a lot of organizations here that have, a lot to offer and do a lot for the community, and it's important. But I think if you pick one, then what about somebody else? So I don't know. We'd have to find a neutral way for one person to cover everything. And I think that that's a possibility. I didn't think of that before. So, and at large, I think should stay exactly the way it is now with the 3 every year. So I guess I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair.
Okay. Comments from other commissioners? Or suggestions on additional roles that would be beneficial? Wendy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to talk again before somebody might want to, but I was going to add, I did think that Civic League could be a valuable thing to consider. I also just want to point out, like, I'm an at-large member, so I do represent the community, the business community indirectly. So looking at how we deal with the at-large could be its own little subset of who are we missing from another piece, and I think that's how it's always functioned, and relatively well. So just to point out the value of some flexibility in all this.
I think that was the point I was going to make, Wendy, is that even if we don't add a dozen members to the NPNEDC to represent all of these organizations or roles in the community, we can still use this list as a as a helpful way of looking at-large members. For instance, we could invite these organizations to select a candidate for at-large. That doesn't have to go any further than that. We can use these as evaluation criteria as we're looking at an at-large member, saying, do you have connections to these other parts of the community that make you more valuable than someone else? There are also other opportunities to invite people simply to attend, to offer their perspective when agenda items that touch their area of expertise are on the table. So we have a lot of options other than strictly membership. But the intent right now is the sort of brainstorming to identify those areas of the community where it would be beneficial to have representation, potentially. Barry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with you. When I looked at this and I started really thinking hard and long about this, there's a few things that come to mind. You have to be careful with how many members you want to put on because of quorum requirements. I mean, you could make the commission as large as you want, but if you're up at, let's say, 16 members, just entertain that for a second, you're going to have to come up with 9 people to formulate a quorum before you can even act on business. My experience has always been the larger they are, the more the quorum requirements, the less likely you're probably going to wind up meeting. And that becomes a problem unto itself. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. The second focus I found that was helpful for me was to try to think about us and what our role is and our mission, and we're a regional planning agency. So as I'm bringing people on board, it's a function of not only just looking at the island, but looking at how we interact with other places, be it over on the Cape, certainly, Martha's Vineyard. There's even an opportunity where we can work with Franklin County as well too. So that's another piece of it is are they, looking at boards, commissions, entities such as the Chamber of Commerce that do have a much larger global aspect to them than just the island. Third thing is that I didn't want the board to become the master of all. There's plenty of good work groups out there who are doing wonderful things for the community. I don't know. I don't think we should be eclipsing them at this point or delving into that at times. We can bring them on an advisory basis, I think, if we need to. But to have them as continuous boards of members of the board, I'm not sure if that's serving our main mission here. And just to address Wendy's thing, like the DPW director and stuff, we learned the hard way with some of those that they are problematic, especially if staff is assigned to it through the town. It doesn't fly, especially when we're getting to things like contracts for the director and stuff. It just does not work in any way, shape, or form. And mind you, with any of these things we pick as well too, they may feel as though they've got a staff member. It doesn't always have to be the chair. They may feel as though they've got a staff member who may fill these roles quite nicely. So I just wanted to throw those few things out, and as we drill down a little bit further, I'll certainly, you'll certainly hear like when we get to members and stuff what my thoughts are. But thank you for listening for a few moments. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry. And I'm glad you hinted at the possibility of participation in ways that are not specifically membership. When we're talking about membership, we have the opportunity to define, who is involved in the NPDC, and membership is not the only way to be involved. Of course, the public is always available to attend a meeting, to write comments, so there are a lot of possibilities. I just encourage commissioners to, stay in that brainstorming mode and think of how we can do the best job for the community. That's really what we're trying to do. I do want to recognize Bruce Mandel. I do want to take his comment on this. So if we can bring Bruce back as a presenter, please. He has his hand up. All right, Bruce, go ahead and unmute. And just as an aside, apparently we're not able to edit the document while it's on the screen, so apologies for that.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of quick things. One is, this is a fascinating list, a lot of work gone into it. I'm wondering, would the public have a chance to provide MPEDC with some comments or suggestions about the list? And I'm asking specifically because there are a few entities listed that we've had more or less success in dealing with over the years, and it's been difficult to work with them. And I think that needs to be considered as, a history of cooperation and working together. So that's one item. The other is, I'm curious, I think I remember seeing a proposed town meeting article that addresses the composition of NPEDC. And if that passes, if it really is a warrant, I mean, I didn't look at the entire warrant, but if that passes, how does this alter what this document is proposing as options?
I'm going to say that's outside the scope of our discussion right now, Bruce. And apologies for punting that off, but we're trying to stay in the brainstorming mode about potential members. Articles at town meeting are sort of expanding the scope beyond what we want to do tonight.
Well, that's understandable. What about my first question about?
So yes, actually, Bruce, that was my next point. So thank you for introducing it. Partly because of the success that we've had with comments on the area plan guidelines, but also because the goal here is to best represent the community. I do want to open this up to suggestions from the public. It's not a vote, it's not a popularity contest, but it's a nomination to think of roles in the community which could be beneficial to have representation on NP and EDC. And I think simply the act of getting that input from the community is valuable in and of itself as we think about our role as NP and EDC in the community. And again, it's not a guarantee that every organization will be asked to send a representative. We have many things to consider, but I am going to ask the planning department to do a public call for nominations, as I think that will be quite interesting to see what we can turn up. Barry?
I'd like to reserve comment for a minute, but I'd like to just hear if any other commissioners have any thoughts about who they think should be on this list. I either people are content with the list or they're being gun shy at the moment. And so people have had a few days to look at this, digest it. I know it's certainly been on people's minds, and I think to get things rolling at this point, this is one of the things that we should be engaging with now. I mean, all right, I'll get to my second point, which is this is not something we want to drag out forever. There should be a very definitive timeline to this thing.
Yes, I've spoken with Leslie already about rolling this out. So it's not going to wait till next year for sure. It's going to happen.
No, so that's just it. And I think, that message needs to, I'm trying to reiterate that message back to the rest of my peers here, that I would like to think by our next meeting, we can pretty much dial this thing into place with a consensus of who we think would be good choices and how many people should be on it. So it's quiet out there right now, but I see 2 more hands raised, so maybe that's a good thing. All right, I'm going to wait a few moments here. Thank you.
Wendy?
I thought I would just make the point that I really think it's important to balance, so many sides of the community. It's our role, right, with the regional planning. I'd like to emphasize with all the transportation discussions we've had all the years I've been on this, I do feel like the airport is probably a very valuable voice. And I just also want to reiterate the point I had made a few meetings back, just a historical component. I think Barry pushed back on that a little bit, but I still feel like it's important to have, like while we expand the airport, we still have our history. Like that kind of tension is what we should be considering in so many of the things that we, that come up before us. And the character of the island is important, whether we call it that or not. So those are the things that I would try to consider as we compose this. I also wanted to make the point, just structurally, I loved the joint meetings that we did with the board of, the select board, and maybe we can build that into this, like how many people, perhaps there's a role for these other groups that we want to hear their voices. For example, we had, like Pete come for the chamber, we have NERDA coming in, like make that a more formal calendar. Like this is the month we hear from this person. This is the month we hear from this person. So maybe they're not a member of this, but we're constantly hearing they're preparing something for the NPD DC to consider and for the public. So I think we could address a few of those voices in a structural way that isn't exactly membership. So.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. That is along the lines of what I'm thinking, is that we can have other opportunities for participation. So thank you for expanding on that. Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to pipe in, by Barry's request, I'm very comfortable with this list. And I'm not saying that there aren't things missing. I can't think of one right now. I mean, I think that, it would be good to have we already have him in a different capacity, but I think it would be good to have a steamship representative here as well. But we have that by way of Nat at the moment. So at the moment, I'm comfortable with this list, and I'm not saying that it couldn't grow, but I think we're in a good spot.
Thank you, Dave. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to say something that might derail this conversation, so I apologize. But I think the the question of at-large members is sort of like a driving point here, because I look at the list of all the potential designee positions, and I think it's fine. I think it's a robust, inclusive group of people who represent various interests and walks of life on Nantucket. But the question is, if we're building out all these positions that people are being represented or only being able to participate in this this commission by being a designee of one of these things, we're potentially reducing the democratic input for regular citizens in this commission. So the alternative would be to do like what some of the other town bodies do, the airport commission, the agricultural commission, instead of strictly delineating all the designee positions. Instead, what they do is say, we need people with this background. So for instance, there could be a certain reserve positions for someone with a business background, someone with a transportation background, someone with a historic preservation background, someone with a elder services background, all these things. But it could be anybody in the community that we appoint as at-large members, and it's not specifically tied into designees of these groups. Even in my limited time here on the island, we've seen that groups sort of like change or become more or less important over time. So I think there's the possibility of having to update this less in the future if we just say, here are the types of skills we want, here are the types of communities we want to represent, but we don't necessarily designate the exact boards that they have to come from. Or in some cases, if it's really important, maybe we do a little bit of both. But I'm not sure we can be very effective at doing both. I sort of think we need to do one or the other. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I think those are good points. And one of the things that just occurred to me from your comments, we've identified groups here, and I think it's also possible to identify informal groups, so groups that are not organized in a particular structure. There was a comment earlier about some commissions have a minority designated position. That's something that we could consider on the list, or that kind of grouping is something we could consider on the list, representing a part of the population that doesn't have a formal organization. Certainly a possibility. So thank you, Seth. Dave?
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Oh, okay. And then John.
Yes, thank you. I'm just taking something of the page of Barry, as far as you have to be careful about having too many people on the board because you might get lost a little bit. Now, saying that, hitting a quorum, as we know, with multiple boards and committees that we've been on, sometimes it just isn't possible. And I think when you represent the entire island with all these unique and independent and distinct boards and committees, it gets a little bit diluted. And I say that with all due respect to each of the boards and committees, because as I look through this, a current position of Conservation Commission can maybe have similar goals and directives as the Land Bank. And then when you look at an at-large position of the Affordable Housing Trust, it may have similar ideas and goals as the Nantucket Housing Authority. As one of the at-large, when we're thinking about a general business representative, maybe the Island Chamber of Commerce that represent business. So we could really maybe, clean it up a little bit and have the representation that we want, but not have everybody on the island, so that we have a commission of 30 people. And I think that might be a little bit detrimental in getting together, and where the best laid plans may not be the best laid plans. I think by streamlining a little bit, we're not going to have everybody represent all the ideas, but for the most part, if we can get a group of qualified people that have a good background, maybe they're known for one particular group, but they have other vested interests. It's almost like going to college and getting a major and a minor. You're still representing well, but you're kind of cleaning it up a little bit and being a little bit more condensed. And I hope I'm not too confusing with the way I've said that, but hopefully the examples have given you some thoughts about that.
Yes, thank you, John. And again, just to reiterate, the idea at this moment is to cast a wide net and then to narrow it down. So we're not trying to create a position on the commission for each one of these potential groups under consideration.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Barry?
Oh, wait a second. I just want to see if anyone else has anything.
Well, Barry, when I'm calling on you, please go ahead with a comment.
Sometimes I'm a little fast on that, and I hear you. That's okay, and that completely just derailed my train of thought at the moment. I would really like for us to be able to maybe dial this in by next month. With the holidays coming up, that will push us into next year, no question about it. People are going to be more focused on family, friends, and all that, rightly so. But I don't want this. I think this is an important step that as a commission we need to be focused on, and I think sooner better than later. It's been on a lot of people's mind for a while, ever since I think we started this dialogue, and I just for one would like to put in my 2 cents to say maybe we can bring this to closure by next month, because otherwise we're into next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. All right, so I have one other suggestion that I want to make here, and I'm going to use an extreme example that I do not expect people to endorse, just as a way of illustrating the concept. So we are defining ourselves as a regional planning group. Should we have a representative, maybe not a member, but in some other capacity, of somebody off the island? For instance, the Martha's Vineyard Commission. Should we invite a Martha's Vineyard Commission member to attend our meetings, to give us a perspective on what's going on in Martha's Vineyard, to see if that is helpful to us as a fellow island? And again, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just using it as an example for illustration. So please don't crucify me for batting for the other team. So just wondering if there is an appropriate role for an off-island representative in some capacity that would be useful for us. I'd like your thoughts on that. Nat?
Mary, thank you for saying that. Barnstable. Remember I brought that up months ago? somehow in our mission statement, plugging in Barnstable. We drive through Barnstable every day. It's our second home. Every single thing that we get comes through Barnstable. And Nantucket kind of, doesn't, well, we read more now because of the instant media with Falmouth and the things that go on down there in Woods Hole, Falmouth, and the Vineyard. We don't need those kind of problems because we just don't have the capacity to handle that. And I think that that's a really good point. I'm not saying that there needs to be somebody directly, but maybe some way for their town manager or someone that could be in some sort of a capacity with us. I'm not saying it even with the planning commission, maybe with the select board, maybe with the county. I don't know, but I do think that that is really important. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Time to cook dinner. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you, Nat. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I see where you're coming from, and I think we can have a policy discussion at some point, but I think it needs to be preceded by a legal discussion, since technically voting representatives of this commission, in my non-attorney opinion, need to be residents of Nantucket County. So I would suggest that we submit a request for legal services to identify that issue. Members of all other boards, committees, and commissions on Nantucket need to be Nantucket residents. So
that's not true. That is absolutely not true. That there are many non-resident members of boards and commissions on Nantucket.
Okay, fine. I won't debate you on that, but I would say we would submit a request for legal services to clarify.
If we get that far, certainly. I don't know that we'll even get that far. That's why I suggested it may not be an official member. It may be in some other capacity. But I hear you, Seth, that you have a good point. Barry?
Yeah, just this brought back something we used to do a long time ago. We would engage with the Martha's Vineyard Commission. We would engage with the Barnstable Commission way back when. So maybe that's the cry I hear at this point, is just like we're reaching out to other organizations on the island, like with the NRTA. Maybe it's time for us to get re-involved with them. And now all of a sudden I'm a real big advocate of Zoom because no one has to travel anywhere. But it would be, to set up a separate meeting and just, work with staff to come up with an itinerary of things to talk about between the Vineyard Commission and our commission, or Barnstable. Like I said, we did it in the dim past. Time moves along, but here we are re-engaging at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Wendy?
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Barry. My mind went there. Like, I'd love to hear their voices, but I'm less sure that having an official seat on this is appropriate. If it was me coming in, I would be advocating for my own place, to the detriment of putting my head in like what's best for Nantucket. So, but I think we need to listen to those other voices a great deal more than we have a chance to do so far. My last thought was, looking at how things get done here, the public-private partnerships are something that have been really valuable as we think about the last, 10 or 20, 10 years with the Remains and the community foundations. I thought I'd put a plug in for that piece of the community that is able to envision funding from different sources. And I know John Trudell's always good at these public-private kind of thoughts, like with the bike path that, if we could just rally some donations, we can move this forward. So that would be relevant to the kind of work that we do here. And I think might accelerate certain projects. Carl Jellemy's thing is part of it too. So I just thought that might be a local voice that we don't quite get enough of. And I wanted to add to that thought.
Thank you, Wendy. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what Wendy and Barry are saying. I think it would be great to reach out to the Vineyard and Barnstable, and then maybe after our meetings, maybe we all three get together and sit in the room and kind of hash things out, make sure we're all going in the same direction. I think it's a really smart way to go. And I do like the list, but I do want to digest a little bit more and see which way to go would be best. So I know what Barry was asking, but I really want to kind of take this one a little bit longer. But I do think that next month we could see where we end up, and maybe it goes another month, but I think let's shoot for next month. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so I am going to emphasize Barry's point. We need you to do the work between now and the next meeting. We're going to go to the public. We'll get whatever the public has to offer. We'll send it out to you. We need you to review it. I'm going to suggest that you look at whatever that list is and come up with, let's say, the top 13, so that we have a little bit of wiggle room with our current count, and come prepared with that to the next meeting. We need you to really put the thought into this. If you're thinking about this and you have suggestions for other potential positions for consideration, by all means, send them to Leslie right away. Don't wait till next month. We need this to move along. So I appreciate your cooperation in that. Any further comments on this topic? Wendy?
Just a quick question. Would it be possible to do that as like a doodle poll or a Google poll? Is there a way that could be done legally? Or no, just a list?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
It's a good suggestion, and thank you for making it. It would certainly help with compiling it.
Right.
But right now we don't have a final list, so I'm not sure how that's going to go.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments, any other committee reports? Not seeing any. Our next meeting is Monday, November 20th, on 5 p.m. via Zoom. Thank you all for your cooperation and great discussion tonight, and we will be in touch to move these topics forward.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you, Joe, for seconding. Roll call, Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Is Christine Garantella still here? Yes, there you are, Christine. Hi. Don Holgate. Up there. I'm sorry. That's Wendy Hudson.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Nat Lowell.
Aye.
Barry Rector.
Aye.
Joe Topham.
Aye.
John Trudell.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
you.
Good night,
Yeah,
all.
Thank you.
What would you like me to get you to eat, honey?